Things have gotten weird in Antarctica, the Rolling Stone reported this week. Sure, there is uncertainty involved, but scientists studying the Doomsday Glacier in a remote area of the Earth are worried that the world is facing the risk of 13 feet of sea level rise. NASA's pictures showing the scale of the changes already underway are frightening. Worse yet, global climate leaders, Politico and the BBC observed, are realizing that they must find solutions without help from the Americans. And the Australian economy is also lagging far behind in reducing fossil fuel consumption. Meanwhile, the Canadians experience unprecedented floods, and indeed the rest of the world, from the tropical islands of Fiji and the Maldives to the Arctic Circle, will suffer consequences. In the coming decade, climate scientists also anticipate new cycles of El Tio and Latia, causing supercharged heat waves and extreme weather events. Preparing for these events and rising seas, the Dutch are innovating adaptations in Rotterdam. But in the United States, local governments from wealthy mountainous communities in Aspen, Colorado, to poorer coastal communities in Atlantic City, New Jersey, realize that they will face special risks. But many communities lack the funds to pay for the needed adaptations. America's bridges, for example, were not designed for this new, more ferocious climate. Can the money managers and the scientists protect the government? Ironically, it may be up to the private sector money managers to save our communities and our local governments. Money can and does influence both the inaction of the state and federal governments and the actions of the energy industry. Institutional investors who manage $15 trillion in assets are calling on the United States to honor its climate commitments in the Paris Agreement. 9 Catholic institutions have divested from fossil fuels, yet more than 75% of the local government pension funds still fail to even consider climate risks. Yes, investor pressure is mounting, and BlackRock Incorporated, a major Occidental petroleum investor, voted in favor of a shareholder proposal calling for a report on the impact climate change could have on the energy company's business. The scientific evidence justifying divestment is mounting too. In the Himalayas, bird breeding patterns have changed and altered wind patterns are expected to cause migration changes. Climate change is altering tree species in Yellowstone National Park, which in turn is changing the diet of its grizzly bears. Ancient bacteria are being rediscovered in the thawing permafrost, leading to concerns about the return of long-lost diseases and plagues. But there are still things we do not know about the carbon cycle. Global dryland forested areas have been underestimated, and carbon is accumulated in Tibet's permafrost. Ocean science is advancing too, with studies of plankton, bacteria, and sea mist. But human impact on the ocean is a certainty, and an X-ray style map of the ocean reveals our vast fingerprint, even in places where humans do not live. Ultimately, we may depend upon negative emissions technology, like reforestation and engineering the environment, by adding reflective particles to the sky in our attempts to reduce the effects of carbon on the earth. Will Republicans, the press, or just a few good moms confront President Trump? President Donald Trump, it seems clear, does not read science literature. After all, his agencies continue to delete their climate science web pages. The likely nominee for the position supervising scientific research at the U.S. Department of Agriculture is not even a scientist. President Trump also dismissed 2 distinguished researchers serving on the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency's Science Advisory Board and intends to replace them with appointees from the regulated industry community. As Axios characterized the problem, it's hard to have a debate over rational climate policy when Washington is split in 2 groups of people, those who think the issue is the most urgent problem facing the world, and those who refuse to acknowledge it's a problem at all. In a similar vein, activist Professor Noam Chomsky told the BBC that the Republican Party is the most dangerous organization in human history. But the New Republic had an interesting take on the problem, blaming the press itself for covering the president's attacks on climate science and policy, because interview after interview shows the reporters failed to press him on the subject of climate change in person. Yet, hope lives. While the FBI deals with turmoil at the top, the U.S. national security agencies have not backed down, and the worldwide threat assessment submitted to the U.S. Senate warns of the risks ahead. Albeit without using the phrase climate change, as the report stated, the U.S. National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, and the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, NASA, reported that 2016 was the hottest year since modern measurements began in 1880. This warming is projected to fuel more intense and frequent extreme weather events than will be distributed unequally in time and geography. Countries with large populations in coastal areas are particularly vulnerable to tropical weather events and storm surges, especially in Asia and Africa. Acknowledging these risks, nations all over the globe are passing climate change legislation, reports the Climate News Network. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson even signed an official declaration by the Arctic Council acknowledging the existence of climate change, the warming conditions in the Arctic, and the role of the Arctic states as the main contributors to climate change. And in the United States, thanks to the votes of Republican Senators John McCain, Lindsey Graham, and Susan Collins, the Senate refused to repeal the Obama administration rules designed to reduce the effects of climate change, inducing methane leaks. That debate is not truly over, however, because a Department of the Interior senior official told The Hill that it intends to suspend, revise, or rescind the rule. In the end, as Yale Climate Connections suggested, the planet needs a few good moms to step up and defend their kids from the future. And remember, Ivanka Trump has a special role reviewing climate policy. She's a mom too.